On the night everything fell apart, Ethan Caldwell wore the same navy blazer he had worn to every major event in the last 5 years. It still fit well. Too well, perhaps. Conservative. Predictable. Vanessa had once joked that if his wardrobe had a personality, it would apologize before speaking. The penthouse overlooking the Boston skyline shimmered with glass and gold light. It belonged to Ryan Whitmore, tech entrepreneur, college friend, and host of what he liked to call intimate gatherings. Intimate meant catered sushi, imported whiskey, and 20 people who all made more money than Ethan. Vanessa thrived in rooms like this. She moved from group to group with a flute of champagne, her black silk dress catching light like liquid shadow. Her laughter floated above the hum of conversation, bright, confident, magnetic. When she touched Ethan's arm, it was for display, not comfort. "Tell them what you said earlier," she urged him now, looping her arm through his. He stiffened slightly. "About what? About how you turned down the promotion?" A few heads turned. Mark and Julia exchanged curious glances. Ethan cleared his throat. It wasn't the right fit. Vanessa tilted her head, smiling. Translation? It sounded like too much responsibility. A ripple of laughter. He smiled politely. "I just value balance." "Balance?" she repeated, amused. "That's very on brand for you, babe." Ryan chuckled. "Man, you've always been the safe one." The word safe landed heavier than intended. Vanessa leaned in closer to the group. "You know what Ethan once told me? That he doesn't need to chase money because happiness matters more." "That's not what Ethan began. "I think it's adorable," she interrupted, squeezing his arm. "Very noble." Julia's smile faltered. "There's nothing wrong with that." "Oh, of course not," Vanessa said lightly. "It's just sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to be married to someone ambitious." Silence, thin and sharp. Ethan felt heat rise up his neck. "Vanessa. What? We're among friends." She laughed again, but her eyes held something colder. "Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive? Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Another round?" "Yes," Vanessa said brightly. "And make mine strong. I need it." As glasses refilled, the conversation drifted, but the energy had shifted. Ethan could feel it like a crack in glass that no one acknowledged, but everyone saw. Later, near the balcony, he overheard whispers. "Did you know? I thought that was just a rumor. With her boss?" "Shh." His chest tightened. He stepped back inside just as Vanessa's voice rose above the music. "Oh, please, like you've never thought about upgrading." The room went still. Ryan blinked. "Vanessa?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Relax, Ethan knows I'm kidding." All eyes turned to him. He searched her face for mercy, for some flicker of restraint. Instead, she smiled slow, deliberate. "Tell them, Ethan," she said softly. "Tell them you trust me." He opened his mouth and heard someone behind him say, half drunk and half brave, "Hard to trust when she's been spending late nights at Daniel's place." Time fractured. Vanessa's expression froze. Daniel. Her boss. The name hung in the air like smoke. No one laughed now. Ethan felt every pair of eyes on him, pitying, curious, relieved it wasn't their marriage unraveling. He looked at Vanessa. She didn't deny it. She didn't reach for him. Instead, she whispered, barely audible, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." The humiliation wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, measured, public. Ethan set his glass down carefully on the marble counter. "I'm going home," he said. No one stopped him. Behind him, the music resumed, tentative at first. Conversations restarted, softer, charged. As the elevator doors closed, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall's navy blazer, steady eyes, a man trying not to break. Above him, through 40 floors of steel and glass, laughter returned. And this time, he knew it wasn't kind. The elevator ride down from Ryan's penthouse felt longer than it should have. 40 floors of mirrored walls and muted jazz piping through hidden speakers. Ethan stood alone, hands in his pockets, watching the numbers descend as if they were counting down the remains of his marriage. But humiliation does not end when a door closes. It lingers. It replays. And in Ethan's mind, the scene upstairs refused to stay still. An hour earlier, Vanessa had been radiant. That was the cruelest part. Under the chandelier light, she shimmered, black silk dress clinging to her frame, diamond studs catching the glow of the skyline behind her. She was the woman men noticed when she walked into a room, the woman other women measured themselves against, and she knew it. "Ethan's just modest," she said, swirling champagne in her glass. "He doesn't need recognition." There was something in her tone light, but sharpened at the edges. Ryan leaned back against the marble counter. "Modest or complacent?" A few people laughed. Ethan tried to keep his smile steady. "It's not complacency. I just don't define myself by my paycheck." Vanessa tilted her head. "That's because you don't have to." The comment seemed innocent at first, until she added, softly but clearly, "I do." The air shifted. Julia glanced at Mark. Someone coughed. Vanessa took a sip of champagne, eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "Sometimes I think I married someone who's content being average." The word didn't explode. It landed. Average. The music kept playing, a soft electronic beat pulsing beneath the conversation, but the circle around them tightened. Ethan forced a small laugh. "We've talked about this." "Yes," she said brightly, "we have." She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to create intimacy, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're comfortable, Ethan. That's the problem. Comfortable in your job. Comfortable in our house. Comfortable letting me carry the ambition." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Vanessa, come on." "No, it's fine," she insisted. "We're adults." She turned back to Ethan. "Tell them why you didn't apply for the senior partnership." He swallowed. "Because it would have meant 80-hour weeks, travel. I didn't want our marriage to suffer." A pause. Vanessa smiled. "Oh, honey." The endearment was surgical. "Our marriage is already suffering." The silence was immediate. Ryan straightened. "Vanessa, what?" she asked, almost amused. "He deserves honesty." Ethan felt something unravel inside his chest. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. She shrugged. "Being transparent." Transparent. The word echoed bitterly. From the edge of the group, Greg, the one who'd been drinking bourbon since 7 p.m., snorted. "Transparent?" he muttered. "That's rich." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" Greg laughed again, sloppy and reckless. "I just mean if we're being transparent, let's really be transparent." Ryan shot him a warning look. "Greg, drop it." But alcohol had already loosened his restraint. "I'm just saying," Greg continued, raising his glass, "maybe don't lecture the guy about ambition when you've been Greg." Julia's voice was sharp now. "Spending half your nights at Daniel Harper's condo." The words didn't shout. They detonated. Music continued for exactly 3 more seconds before someone reached for the speaker and turned it off. Vanessa's face drained of color. "What did you just say?" she asked, too calm. Greg blinked, as if waking from a dream. Ryan grabbed his arm. "You've had too much." But it was too late. Daniel Harper, her boss, managing director, married, powerful. Ethan felt his heartbeat in his ears. He turned slowly toward Vanessa. She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at Greg. "You're disgusting," she whispered. "Am I?" Greg shot back, shame now mixing with defensiveness. "Or am I just saying what everyone already knows?" The room became a gallery of frozen expressions. Julia staring at the floor, Mark pretending to check his phone, Ryan rubbing his forehead. No one looked at Ethan directly, and that was worse. "Vanessa," Ethan said softly. She finally turned to him. There it was. Not denial, not outrage, calculation. "You're drunk," she told Greg, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan's throat tightened. "Is it true?" A simple question, one that should have demanded an immediate answer. Instead, Vanessa exhaled slowly. "It's complicated." The phrase sliced deeper than any confession. "Complicated," Ethan repeated. She stepped toward him, lowering her voice as if intimacy could undo what had just happened. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." The words from earlier returned, but this time there was no ambiguity. Not if, not what, only how. Ryan tried to intervene. Guys, let's not do this here. But it was already happening here, in front of everyone. Ethan felt exposed like his skin had been peeled back for inspection. So it's true, he said. Vanessa's eyes flickered with something almost defensive. You've been distant for months, she said quietly. Emotionally absent. You buried yourself in routine. He stared at her. So you slept with him. She hesitated. That was the answer. The silence stretched unbearably. No one moved. No one spoke. The Boston skyline glittered behind the glass, cold, indifferent. Ethan became acutely aware of the way he was standing, of his blazer, of his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, of the fact that every person in that room was witnessing the collapse of his dignity. Vanessa straightened her shoulders. I didn't mean for it to go this far. There it was again. Not apology, explanation, justification. Greg muttered, Jesus, under his breath. Ethan felt the urge to defend himself, to argue, to ask how long, how many times, whether she ever loved him at all. But something inside him refused to perform. He would not give them a show. Instead, he reached for the counter and placed his untouched drink down with deliberate care. I'm going home, he said. Vanessa blinked. But she didn't follow him, didn't grab his hand, didn't say she was sorry. He walked past the circle of friends who suddenly found the floor fascinating. The hallway felt longer than before. Behind him, whispers resumed. Not laughter, worse. Sympathy, speculation, relief that it wasn't their marriage on display. As he reached the elevator, he heard Vanessa's voice faintly through the open space. He pushed me away. The doors slid shut before he could hear the rest. Now, in the quiet of the descending elevator, Ethan stared at his reflection again. He didn't look broken. That was the strange part. He looked composed, calm, a man leaving a party early. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. Not just trust, not just love, respect. And once that is publicly dismantled, it doesn't return quietly. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, Ethan stepped out into the cold Boston night. The city air cut sharp against his skin. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a husband. He felt like a man who had been reduced to a punchline. And everyone had heard it. The morning after the party, Boston looked indifferent. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors of the Caldwell house in Brookline, illuminating the quiet wreckage of a life that had not yet physically changed, but emotionally had already collapsed. Ethan hadn't slept. He had sat at the edge of the bed until dawn, jacket still on, staring at the pale gray wall opposite him. Vanessa hadn't come home until 3 in the morning. He heard her heels in the hallway, the soft click of the bathroom door, the shower running. She didn't step into the bedroom. She didn't explain. By the time she emerged, dressed for work in a cream pantsuit, he was still sitting there. We should talk tonight, she said, adjusting her watch without meeting his eyes. Is it still complicated? He asked. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. Don't start. I'm not starting, I'm asking. She exhaled sharply. You want honesty? Fine. I felt invisible in this marriage. He let the words settle between them. Invisible. You humiliated me in front of everyone, he said quietly. Vanessa's lips tightened. You think I wasn't humiliated? Greg blurting out private business like that? Private business, not betrayal. Business. I have a board presentation this morning, she continued. I can't do this right now. And then she left. The door closed with a softness that felt cruel. The text began around noon, not from Vanessa, from the group. Ryan, hey man, rough night. Let's grab a drink soon. Mark, sorry it got weird. Vanessa was emotional. Emotional, as if infidelity were a mood swing. Julia called in the afternoon. Her voice was gentle, rehearsed. I just think maybe there's more going on than you realize, she said carefully. What does that mean? Ethan asked. I mean, Vanessa's been under a lot of pressure. You know how intense her firm is. So that makes it my fault? No, she said quickly. I'm just saying relationships are complicated. There it was again. Complicated. No one said she betrayed you. No one said that was wrong. Instead, there was nuance, context, understanding, for her. By the end of the week, the narrative had subtly shifted. Vanessa had confided in Julia that she felt unsupported, that Ethan had checked out, that she had been lonely. Lonely in a 5-bedroom house. Lonely with a husband who cooked dinner 3 nights a week. Lonely beside a man who had turned down a promotion to protect their time together. Ethan began to notice something else. Silence. Invitations stopped. The group chat, once filled with weekend plans and memes, continued without him. He could see it on social media. Instagram stories from rooftop bars, smiling photos, Vanessa in the center of most of them, captioned healing, growth, choosing happiness. The comments flooded in. You deserve the world, so proud of your strength, queen energy. Ethan stared at the screen until the words blurred. He wanted to scream. Instead, he put the phone down. At work, things were quieter but not easier. In the open floor office of the financial firm where he'd worked for 11 years, routine used to comfort him. The hum of keyboards, the steady rhythm of spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Now it felt suffocating. He caught 2 associates whispering near the coffee machine. Is that him? Yeah. The news had traveled. Not details, just enough. He imagined the version circulating. Wife cheats. Husband doesn't see it coming. Probably wasn't enough for her. The unspoken implication hovered in every sideways glance. Not successful enough. Not dominant enough. Not man enough. Modern America liked to pretend it had evolved beyond old definitions of masculinity. But Ethan could feel them pressing in on him. A real man would have known. A real man wouldn't let his wife stray. A real man would fight. Instead, he had left quietly. That part replayed in his head most often. Should he have shouted? Thrown something? Demanded answers? Would that have restored something? Or just made him look pathetic? One evening, a week later, Ryan finally came by. They sat on the back patio, beers untouched between them. Vanessa's staying with Julia for now, Ryan said carefully. Ethan nodded. She's figuring things out. Is she? Ethan asked. Ryan hesitated. Look, man, you know how driven she is. Daniel, he's powerful, connected. That world is intense. Ethan stared at him. Are you justifying it? No, Ryan said quickly. I'm just saying, maybe it wasn't just about you. The words were meant to comfort. They didn't. Because if it wasn't about him, then what was he? Replaceable? Ryan shifted uncomfortably. She said you've been distant. I've been steady, Ethan replied. Sometimes steady feels like stagnant. The comment wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was honest. Ryan stood to leave, clapping him on the shoulder. Take some time. Work on yourself. Hit the gym. You'll bounce back. Bounce back. As if betrayal were a pulled muscle. Nights became the hardest. The house felt cavernous without Vanessa's perfume lingering in the air. Ethan found himself replaying small moments from the past year. Her late meetings, the way she guarded her phone, the subtle irritation in her voice when he asked about her day. How long had he been blind? Or had he simply trusted? There's a difference. But society rarely distinguishes. At 2 a.m, he opened his laptop and typed into a search bar, "Why do women cheat on stable men?" The articles that appeared were clinical. Emotional dissatisfaction, unmet ambition, desire for excitement. He read until his eyes burned. Each explanation felt like an indictment. You weren't exciting enough. You weren't ambitious enough. You weren't enough. Weeks passed. Vanessa filed for separation before he did. The papers arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Clean, efficient, professional. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal language that reduced 11 years to assets and liabilities. That was when the isolation became real. Not just socially, internally. He began to question everything. Was he too passive? Too content? Had he mistaken loyalty for love? In a culture obsessed with forward momentum career ladders, personal branding, hustle, had he chosen a version of manhood that no longer impressed anyone? The thought hollowed him out. One Sunday, he walked through downtown Boston alone. Couples passed him holding hands. Groups of friends laughed outside brunch spots. He caught his reflection in a storefront window. Still the navy blazer, still the steady posture, but something in his eyes had shifted. He no longer saw himself as a husband, or even as a victim. He saw himself as someone who had been publicly weighed and found lacking. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the quiet agreement in everyone else's silence. That night, he muted the group chat. Then he turned off his phone entirely. For the first time since the party, the world went quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. And in that emptiness, Ethan faced the question he'd been avoiding. If he wasn't Vanessa's husband, if he wasn't the stable one, if he wasn't enough, then who was he? The house offered no answer, only echo. The first therapy session felt like a job interview for a position Ethan hadn't applied for. Dr. Melissa Grant's office overlooked the Charles River neutral decor, soft lighting, two identical gray chairs positioned deliberately equal. Equality, Ethan thought, was ironic. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late. She wore navy slacks and a white blouse, her hair pulled back into a sleek, low bun. Professional. Composed. As if this were a strategy meeting rather than the post-mortem of a marriage. "Thank you both for coming," Dr. Grant said gently. "This space is for honesty." Vanessa folded her legs. "That's all I've ever wanted." Ethan didn't react. Dr. Grant turned to him. "Ethan, how have you been feeling since the separation?" He considered the question carefully. "Embarrassed?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Embarrassed how?" the therapist prompted. "Inadequate," he said. "Publicly replaced." Vanessa exhaled sharply. "You weren't replaced." Ethan looked at her for the first time that afternoon. "You had an affair. It wasn't about sex," she snapped. Dr. Grant interjected softly. "Then what was it about?" Vanessa hesitated. "Feeling alive," she admitted. "Feeling challenged. Daniel pushed me. He expected more." The name hung in the room. Daniel Harper, managing director, married. Charismatic in a way that filled conference rooms. "And I didn't?" Ethan asked quietly. "You settled," she said. "You stopped striving." "For what?" he replied. "We had a house. We had savings. We had—" "You had comfort," she interrupted. "I wanted momentum." Momentum. Ethan almost laughed. "So you humiliated me at a party?" "I didn't mean for that to happen. But you meant everything else." Her silence answered. Dr. Grant leaned forward slightly. "Vanessa, do you feel remorse for how Ethan found out?" Vanessa's eyes flickered, not with guilt, but irritation. "I regret the scene," she said carefully, "but I won't apologize for wanting more." The distinction was surgical. Ethan felt something final shift inside him. Not anger, clarity. The legal meetings were worse. Conference rooms with polished tables and bottled water arranged in perfect symmetry. Attorneys speaking in calm, neutral tones about division of property, spousal support, retirement accounts. 11 years reduced to bullet points. The Brookline house would be sold, her 401k, his investments, joint accounts split. Vanessa's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, spoke efficiently. Given Mrs. Caldwell's higher earning history over the last 3 years, spousal adjustment may not be necessary. Vanessa didn't look at Ethan. He nodded once. "I'm not asking for anything." Claire blinked. "You're entitled to." "I don't want it." Vanessa finally turned toward him. "You see, this is what I mean." "What?" he asked. "You just withdraw. You make everything quiet." He held her gaze. "I'm not fighting for scraps of something you already left." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Outside the window, traffic crawled through downtown Boston, life moving forward, indifferent to the negotiation of heartbreak inside a glass room. They divided the house over 2 weekends. The dismantling was slow, drawers emptied, closets halved, books sorted into silent piles. Vanessa moved with efficiency, labeling boxes, scheduling movers, checking off lists on her phone. Ethan found himself pausing over small things. A chipped ceramic bowl from their first apartment, a framed photo from Cape Cod, both of them sunburned and laughing at something the camera hadn't captured. He held it a moment too long. "You can keep that," Vanessa said without looking up. He set it in his box. In the bedroom, her side of the closet thinned rapidly. He noticed what she didn't pack. The navy sweater he once told her made her look softer. The heels she said were uncomfortable. New dresses had replaced them months ago. "How long?" he asked suddenly. She stopped folding. "What?" "How long were you with him?" She stared at the carpet. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of dinners, meetings, excuses. And you came home to me every night. "That's unfair," she snapped. "You think this was easy for me?" "I don't know what it was for you," he said evenly. "You never told me." She stood abruptly. "Because you wouldn't have understood." The arrogance of that statement stunned him more than the affair. "You didn't even give me the chance." Vanessa's expression hardened. "You were content being small, Ethan. I wasn't." There it was again. Small, average, comfortable. Each word another brick in the narrative she had built, one where her betrayal was evolution and his steadiness was failure. He didn't argue, not anymore. After she moved into a high-rise rental downtown, the house felt cavernous. The for sale sign appeared on the lawn 3 weeks later. Neighbors pretended not to stare. At work, Ethan requested fewer client-facing meetings. He told himself it was temporary. In truth, he was rebuilding something invisible. Routine became discipline. He began waking at 5:30 a.m., running along the Charles before sunrise. The cold air burned his lungs, but it felt honest. At night, he read instead of scrolling. He met with a financial advisor, not because he needed to, but because planning gave him structure. Dr. Grant continued seeing him individually. "Do you believe you caused her affair?" she asked one afternoon. He hesitated. "Part of me does." "And the other part?" "Knows that wanting ambition doesn't require betrayal." She nodded. "That part sounds grounded." Grounded. A word no one had used before. Not small, not safe. Grounded. The distinction mattered. The day the divorce papers were finalized, it rained. Vanessa signed quickly, efficient, professional. When it was his turn, Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. This was not the dramatic ending people expected. No shouting, no tears, just ink drying on a decision that had been forming for months. As they left the building, Vanessa paused beneath the awning. "For what it's worth," she said, eyes forward, "I did love you." He believed her. In a way. "And I loved you," he replied, past tense. She looked at him, then really looked at him. For a flicker of a second, something uncertain crossed her face. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Momentum calling. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. She gave a tight smile. "I already have." And she walked into the rain toward a waiting car. Ethan remained under the awning a moment longer. He expected devastation. Instead, he felt something quieter. Space. For the first time in months, there was no performance required. No audience. No group chat waiting for commentary. Just him. Alone, but not exposed. He stepped into the rain deliberately, letting it soak through his shirt. Cold. Real. His life was smaller now, simpler. But it was his. And this time, there was no one in the room to laugh. 3 years later, Ethan no longer wore the navy blazer. He still lived in Boston, but not in Brookline. After the house sold, he moved into a smaller brownstone apartment in Back Bay. Brick walls, tall windows, nothing excessive. The kind of place that didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. His mornings were steady. Coffee, a run along the Charles, work at a boutique financial advisory firm where partnership meant collaboration, not hierarchy. He had chosen it deliberately. Momentum, he'd learned, could be quiet. He rarely checked Vanessa's social media anymore. At first, he had tortured himself with it. Her downtown high-rise apartment, professional headshots, panels on women in leadership, vacation photos from Aspen, captions about rising after heartbreak. She had turned the narrative into a brand. Hashtag resilient. Hashtag self-growth. Hashtag know your worth. The comments were relentless admiration. You're glowing. You chose yourself. You inspire me. Ethan eventually muted her. It wasn't anger. It was survival. The scandal broke on a Thursday. He was in a conference room reviewing projections when his phone buzzed 3 times in quick succession. Ryan. Mark. Julia. He almost ignored it. Then a news notification lit up his screen. Managing Director Daniel Harper under internal investigation amid ethics allegations. Ethan's pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. The article was brief but pointed. Anonymous complaints. Misuse of company resources. Inappropriate relationships with subordinates. A culture of favoritism and coercion. There was no name attached to the subordinate, but Ethan didn't need one. His phone rang. Ryan. He answered. Have you seen it? Ryan asked immediately. Yes. A pause. Apparently HR has been investigating for months, Ryan continued. There are emails, expense accounts, travel. Ethan leaned against the wall. And Vanessa's name is circulating. Circulating. The polite word for unraveling. Within days, it escalated. Another article, then another. A whistleblower from within the firm confirmed multiple relationships, promotions influenced by personal involvement, confidential settlements. Daniel Harper was placed on administrative leave. Vanessa's LinkedIn profile quietly removed her most recent role. Her Instagram went dark. The last post remained frozen, a photo of her in a tailored blazer, city skyline behind her. Leading with integrity. The irony felt almost too heavy. Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't feel vindicated. What he felt was something stranger. Recognition. The narrative was shifting. The same friends who once offered nuance now sounded different. Ryan came by his apartment that weekend. They sat at the kitchen counter, simpler than the Marble Island in Brookline, but warmer. I owe you an apology, Ryan said abruptly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. For what? For not seeing it. Seeing what? Ryan ran a hand through his hair. That night, the party, we all acted like it was mutual dysfunction, like you'd both contributed equally. Ethan said nothing, but this? Ryan gestured vaguely toward his phone. This wasn't about ambition or you being comfortable. This was power, image, status. Ethan poured them each a drink. I think we wanted to believe her, Ryan admitted. She was convincing. Yes, Ethan said quietly. She was. Julia called the next day. Her voice sounded smaller than Ethan remembered. I've been thinking about that night, she said. So have I. I'm sorry, she whispered. I sided with her. I thought you were emotionally distant. I was steady, he replied. She let out a soft breath. I see that now. Do you? He didn't say it aloud. Mark texted later. You didn't deserve that. None of it. The messages came in waves over the next week. Regret dressed in casual language. We should have been there. We didn't know the whole story. You handled it with grace. Grace. The word tasted unfamiliar. Years ago, they had interpreted his silence as weakness. Now it looked like dignity. Vanessa's silence lasted exactly 12 days. Then she posted. A black square, white text. There are 2 sides to every story. I will not be defined by rumors or targeted attacks. The comments were different this time. Some supportive, others questioning, a few blunt. Were you involved? Is this about Daniel Harper? Transparency matters. The algorithm had turned. Admiration had limits. Ethan read the post once, then closed the app. 2 weeks later, Vanessa called him. He hadn't heard her voice in over a year. He let it ring once, twice, then answered. Ethan. Her tone was controlled, but thinner than he remembered. Yes, I assume you've seen everything. I have. A pause. They're exaggerating, she said quickly. The firm needed someone to blame. Did you report to him? Yes. Were you involved with him? Silence. Ethan. Vanessa. Her breath trembled just slightly. It wasn't like that, she said. It was complicated. The same word, 3 years later. He almost smiled. I hope you're okay, she added, as if remembering to include him in the sentence. I am. Another pause. I didn't think it would end like this. He considered that. It ended 3 years ago, he said gently. She didn't respond. I have to go, he continued. Ethan, she said quickly, do you hate me? He looked out the window at the late afternoon light falling across brick buildings. No, he said honestly, I don't. And that surprised him, because he truly didn't. I hope you figure out what you're looking for, he added. The line echoed something from long ago. She went quiet, then softly, almost to herself. I thought I already had. The call ended. That evening, Ethan walked along the river as the sun dipped low. The city felt the same, but something fundamental had shifted. Not revenge, not triumph. Correction. The golden image had cracked. Not because he exposed it, but because truth eventually resists polish. His friends saw now what they hadn't before. That night in the penthouse hadn't been about a weak husband. It had been about a woman protecting a narrative, and an audience willing to believe it. Ethan stopped on the bridge and looked out over the water. 3 years ago, he had felt publicly diminished. Now he felt intact. Not larger, not vindicated, just whole. The difference was subtle, but it was everything. The invitation came as a calendar request. Ryan Whitmore, 40th birthday dinner. Location, private room, the Harbor Room, Seaport District. Dress code, cocktail. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time before clicking accept. 3 years ago, he would have analyzed every possible interaction, replayed scenarios, prepared lines. Now he simply noted the date and returned to his spreadsheet. Still, when the evening arrived, there was a quiet tightening in his chest as he adjusted his cufflinks. Not navy this time. Charcoal gray. Clean lines. No nostalgia attached. The Harbor Room overlooked the water-glass walls, low lighting, curated elegance. The kind of place that whispered exclusivity instead of announcing it. When Ethan stepped inside the private dining space, conversations dipped almost imperceptibly, then resumed. Ryan approached first, arms open. You made it! Happy birthday, Ethan said. Ryan held his gaze a second longer than necessary. I'm glad you're here. The table was long, set with minimalist precision. Julia sat near the center, twisting the stem of her wine glass. Mark stood near the bar, shoulders stiff. Vanessa was not there. No one mentioned her. At first, the conversation floated safely work updates, travel stories, harmless complaints about aging. But beneath it ran a current of unfinished history. Ethan felt it in the pauses, in the way eyes lingered on him, then slid away. Dinner plates were cleared, dessert menus declined. One by one, people began stepping out to the balcony overlooking the harbor. Ryan touched Ethan's elbow. Walk with me? They stepped into the cool night air. The city shimmered behind them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan exhaled sharply. I handled things badly, he said. Ethan didn't pretend not to understand. Which part? Ryan gave a humorless laugh. All of it. The wind tugged at his jacket as he continued. That night, I should have shut it down. I should have told Greg to stop. He paused. I should have stood next to you. Ethan watched a ferry glide across dark water. You were shocked, he said. That's not an excuse. No, Ethan agreed, it's not. Ryan nodded slowly. We all thought it was marital tension. Two ambitious people misaligned. Ethan glanced at him. You thought I wasn't ambitious. Ryan winced. We thought you were comfortable. There it was again. Except this time, the word carried shame. I confused stability with complacency, Ryan admitted. That's on me. Ethan considered this. For years, that assumption had haunted him. Now, hearing it spoken aloud, owning its unfairness felt strangely light. I was steady, Ethan said calmly. I see that now. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, man. Not just for that night, for the months after. We let you disappear. Ethan studied his friend's face, older now, lines deeper around the eyes. I disappeared because I needed to, he replied. Not because you pushed me. Ryan shook his head. Still, the apology hung between them, not dramatic, not theatrical, just heavy with recognition. Ethan nodded once. I appreciate that. It was an absolution, but it was enough. Inside, Julia approached him near the bar. Her lipstick had smudged slightly. She hadn't noticed. Can we talk? She asked softly. They moved to a quieter corner. I've replayed that party 100 times, she began. The way we laughed. Ethan remembered the laughter clearly. It didn't sound cruel at the time, she said quickly. It sounded like teasing. It was cruel, he replied. Her eyes glistened. I know. Silence stretched. I thought I was being supportive, she continued. Vanessa told me she felt unseen. I believed her. That doesn't make you malicious, Ethan said. It makes me naive, she swallowed. When the scandal broke, I realized how easily I'd accepted her version. It was easier than questioning everything. Yes, Ethan said quietly. It usually is. Julia's voice dropped to a whisper. Did we make it worse for you? He considered the question carefully. Yes. The honesty startled her, but he didn't soften it. When everyone framed it as mutual dysfunction, he continued, it made me question my own memory, my own worth. Her hand trembled slightly around her glass. I'm so sorry. He believed her. The shame in her eyes wasn't performative. It was uncomfortable, which meant it was real. Later, Mark cornered him near the coat rack. I was a coward, Mark blurted out, skipping pleasantries. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I didn't want drama, Mark continued, so I stayed neutral. Neutral, Ethan repeated, which was just another way of siding with her. Mark ran a hand through his hair. I told myself it wasn't my place. It wasn't, Ethan said. That's not true, Mark replied. We were your friends. The word landed carefully. Were. Ethan studied him. You're here now, he said. Mark let out a slow breath. Yeah. They stood in silence, the hum of conversation filling the space. I used to think masculinity meant being loud, Mark admitted suddenly. Defending yourself publicly, taking control. Ethan tilted his head slightly. When you walked out that night without yelling, I thought you looked weak. And now? Mark met his eyes. Now I think it took more strength than any of us had. The statement wasn't flattering. It was corrective. 3 years ago, Ethan had walked into an elevator feeling reduced. Tonight, he stood in a room where the narrative was quietly rewriting itself. Not because he demanded it, but because time had stripped away illusion. As the evening wound down, Ryan raised a glass for a final toast. To growth, he said. To perspective. And to people who handle life with more grace than we deserve. His eyes flicked towards Ethan briefly. Subtle, but intentional. Glasses clinked. Ethan felt the weight of old humiliation, once sharp and consuming, now distant. Not erased, but integrated. When he stepped outside alone, the harbor wind cool against his face, he realized something unexpected. He no longer needed their validation. Their apologies mattered, but they didn't define him. 3 years ago, he had felt like a man publicly dismantled. Tonight, he felt like someone who had endured and remained intact. The laughter that drifted from the restaurant behind him sounded different now. Not mocking, not pitying, just human, imperfect. He adjusted his coat and began walking toward the parking garage, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. He didn't rush, he didn't linger. For the first time since that night in the penthouse, he felt something that had nothing to do with Vanessa, or Daniel, or scandal. Peace. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. Not at a gala, not at a party, not in a setting designed for spectacle, just a coffee shop on Newbury Street. Ethan had stepped in between client meetings, rain still clinging to his coat. The place smelled of espresso and wet pavement. Indie music hummed softly through ceiling speakers. Students typed on laptops. A barista called out names without looking up. Vanessa. The name cut through the air. Ethan didn't react at first. Then he heard it again. "Vanessa, your latte." He turned. She stood near the counter, profile sharp against the window light. For a moment, memory distorted reality. His mind tried to superimpose the woman from the rooftop parties, the polished executive, the curated Instagram glow. But this Vanessa was different. Her coat was expensive but wrinkled at the sleeves. Her hair, once perfectly sleek, was loosely pinned as if done in haste. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, not ruined, not defeated, but restless. She sensed him before she saw him. When her gaze lifted and locked onto his, something flickered surprise first, then calculation. Ethan. The space between them felt smaller than the 3 years that had passed. "Hi," he said. There was no tremor in his voice. That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. "I didn't know you came here," she said quickly. "I work nearby." A pause. "Well," she added, almost defensively, "so do I. Consulting now." He nodded once. "I heard." Of course he had. Her career had survived, but sideways. After the internal investigation, she had resigned before formal disciplinary action. No admission of wrongdoing, no public confession, just strategic exit. The firm had moved on. So had the headlines. But reputation lingers differently than scandal. She shifted her weight. "Do you have time?" He considered the question. 3 years ago, he would have avoided this moment. Now, he found himself oddly curious. 10 minutes, he said. They chose a small table near the window. Rain traced uneven lines down the glass behind her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Vanessa inhaled. "I didn't expect to see you," she began. "Boston's not that big," he replied gently. Her fingers tightened around her cup. "You look good." "So do you." She gave a faint, humorless smile. "That's generous." Silence again. It wasn't hostile, just loaded. "I heard about the dinner at Ryan's," she said finally. He met her eyes. It was nice. I wasn't invited. There was something sharp beneath the statement. "That surprised you?" he asked. Her jaw tensed. "I thought we were all adults." "We are." The implication lingered. She leaned back slightly. "So?" They apologized. "Yes." Her eyes flickered. "You must feel vindicated." The word sounded almost accusing. "I don't," he said calmly. She searched his face as if looking for hidden triumph. "Then what do you feel?" she pressed. He considered it honestly. "Finished." The answer caught her off guard. "Finished," she repeated, "with needing anyone to understand it the way I did." Her shoulders stiffened. "I never asked you to carry it alone." "No," he agreed. "You just explained it away." The rain intensified outside, drumming softly against the glass. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "You think this has been easy for me?" she asked. He held her gaze. "I think it's been complicated." The word landed between them like an old ghost. She flinched. "You always do that," she said. "Do what?" "Reduce everything to calm statements. You never fight." "I fought," he replied quietly, "just not publicly." Her breath caught. For the first time, her defensiveness faltered. "I felt trapped," she admitted suddenly, "by the house, by routine, by being the one who wanted more." "I never stopped you from wanting more." "You didn't have to," she shot back. "Your stillness felt like gravity." He absorbed that. "That's not the same as betrayal." "No," she whispered. The admission was small but real. He watched her carefully now. The sharp edges were still there, but dulled by something else. Fatigue. "You know what scared me most?" she continued, voice lower. "Not the scandal. Not losing the job." He waited. "That you walked away without begging." The honesty stunned them both. "I thought you'd fight for me," she said. "Yell. Demand I stay." "I wasn't fighting for someone who'd already left," he replied. She looked down at her hands. "I thought ambition meant never settling," she murmured, "but I confused restlessness with growth." The confession hovered, fragile. "And Daniel?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. She let out a slow breath. "Daniel was momentum, not substance." The sentence felt heavy with hindsight. "You built an image," Ethan said, "of resilience, of empowerment." "I had to," she said quickly. "Do you know what it's like to be publicly tied to a scandal like that?" "Yes," he said softly. The words stilled her. For a moment, neither of them moved. 3 years collapsed into a shared understanding neither had acknowledged before. "I was cruel to you," she said finally. "Not justified, not reframed. Cruel." The word hung in the air. Ethan felt something inside him loosen, not because of victory, but because of recognition. "Yes," he said. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not strategic, not performative. Just tired." He studied her carefully. 3 years ago, he had wanted this moment, an apology, clean and undeniable. Now it felt less explosive than he'd imagined. "I accept that," he said. She looked up quickly. "You do?" "Yes." Her shoulders dropped slightly. "But I don't need it," he added. The distinction settled quietly between them. Outside, the rain began to ease. Vanessa straightened, some of her old composure returning, but softer now. "Are you happy?" she asked. He thought of his morning runs, his smaller apartment, the quiet pride in work chosen deliberately, the absence of performance. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. "I'm still figuring that out," she admitted. For once, there was no defensiveness in her voice, just uncertainty. He stood, glancing at his watch. "I should go." She rose as well. There was no embrace, no lingering touch. Just two people who once shared a life standing inches apart, no longer bound by it. "Ethan," she said as he reached for his coat. He paused. "I did love you." "I know," he replied. "And I'm sorry I confused wanting more with needing someone else." He gave a small, genuine nod. "I hope you find peace," he said. She didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was barely audible. "You already have." He stepped out into the damp street, the air cool and clean after the rain. Behind him, through the window, Vanessa remained standing for a moment before sitting back down alone. No audience, no narrative, just reflection. Ethan didn't look back again. This time, the elevator doors were metaphorical, and when they closed, there was no laughter above him, only quiet. Winter arrived without drama. Boston did not explode into transformation. It hardened slowly. The air sharpened. The Charles turned metallic beneath gray skies. Holiday lights appeared in windows as if people were trying to warm themselves from the inside out. Ethan no longer avoided reflections. Storefront glass, elevator doors, the dark screen of his phone. The man looking back at him felt unfamiliar not because he had changed dramatically, but because the quiet self-doubt that once shadowed his expression was gone. After the coffee shop encounter, something settled. Not closure in the cinematic sense, not vindication, not triumph. Integration. The past no longer interrupted his present. A week before Christmas, Ethan received an email from a junior analyst at his firm. Subject, "Thank you." It was brief. "I appreciate the way you lead. You don't micromanage. You don't compete. You make space. That matters more than you probably realize." He read it twice. 3 years ago, he might have dismissed it as politeness. Now, he let it land. Make space. Once, Vanessa had described his steadiness as smallness, gravity, stagnation. Now, someone else experienced it as strength. Perspective, he'd learned, shapes reality. The apology dinner, the scandal, the coffee shop, none of it had magically repaired the past. What it had done was dismantle a lie he'd been carrying, that he had been inadequate, that if he had been more ambitious, louder, sharper, she would have stayed. Dr. Grant had once asked him, "Why do you assume her betrayal was a referendum on your worth?" At the time, he didn't have an answer. Now he did. Because humiliation feels personal. Public humiliation feels defining. But he had begun to understand something subtler. Vanessa hadn't betrayed him because he was insufficient. She had betrayed him because she was restless, because she equated desire with destiny, because momentum felt more intoxicating than loyalty. That was her narrative. It didn't have to be his. On New Year's Eve, Ryan hosted another gathering, smaller this time, simpler. No penthouse, just his renovated townhouse with close friends and quiet music. Ethan hesitated before attending, not out of fear, out of awareness. But he went. The evening felt different from 3 years ago. No sharp jokes, No status comparisons. No subtle performances. Just conversation that wandered without needing to impress. At one point, Julia approached him with a glass of champagne. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am." "Because of what she said?" He considered it. "No," he replied. "Because of what I stopped telling myself." She studied him curiously. That I was the reason she left. Julia nodded slowly. That's a heavy story to carry. It was. Across the room, Ryan caught his eye and raised his glass. Not in apology this time, in acknowledgement. Ethan returned the gesture. No speeches were necessary. Near midnight, Ethan stepped outside onto the small balcony overlooking the quiet street. Snow had begun to fall, soft, deliberate. The world below looked temporarily clean. He remembered another balcony years ago, another skyline, laughter that cut instead of connected. For a long time, that memory had felt like an open wound. Now, it felt like a chapter. Important, painful, but closed. He took out his phone, not to scroll, not to check Vanessa's page. Instead, he opened his notes app. There was an entry dated the week after the party. He had written it at 2 a.m, barely able to breathe. I don't know who I am without her. I don't know if I was ever enough. He stared at the words for a long time. Then he typed beneath them. I was always enough. I just chose someone who wanted something different. He didn't delete the old sentence. He let both exist. Growth wasn't erasure, it was revision. Inside, the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Voices overlapping, glasses raised. Ethan stayed outside 1 second longer than the others. He didn't make a wish. He didn't ask for redemption. He already had it. Not from Vanessa, not from his friends, from himself. When midnight arrived, fireworks echoed faintly over the harbor. He stepped back inside. Ryan clapped him on the shoulder. To new beginnings. Ethan smiled, not wide, not performative, just real. To peace, he said. Later, walking home through the snow, he felt no urgency to fill the silence with noise. His life was not dramatic now. It was deliberate. Smaller than before, perhaps, but grounded. He passed a dark storefront window and caught his reflection again. No navy blazer, no visible scars. Just a man who had been publicly broken and privately rebuilt. The humiliation that once defined him had lost its edge. It had become memory, lesson, proof of endurance. As he reached his building, snow gathering lightly on his coat, he paused for a moment before going inside. 3 years ago, he had left a party feeling diminished. Tonight, he entered his own doorway whole. Not because everyone apologized, not because the truth surfaced, but because he chose to forgive the one person who had judged him most harshly, himself. The door closed gently behind him. No laughter, no audience, just quiet. And the steady rhythm of a life no longer defined by what was done to him, but by what he chose next.